Hi, you guys. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about IB English and the IB English Language and Literature course and what the IB expects from you. I think I already said a little bit about who we are, and we're going to our Google Classroom, and that we're going to start by reading Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. I hope you're reading the book and well into it. I hope you're watching the videos. Last time I said a little bit about your grade for Unit 1, but again, please read the book. Today, what I'm going to try to talk about and what I'd like to describe is just what the IB expects from you in this course. I will just give you the overview. There is a document about 70 pages in PDF form that is on our Google Classroom. There it is, Language and Literature Guide, First Assessment 2021. It's there. You can read it if you like. Personally, I would prefer that you read Things Fall Apart, or perhaps that you pick up your favorite poet or your favorite novelist and read a novel, read some good literature, which in my opinion is always a better use of your time than reading the IB guides. However, some of you who are very interested and focused on what the IB wants and how your grade is constructed, or maybe, I hope not, but maybe your parents will want to read this. If they do, just give it to them and say, knock yourselves out, because it will knock you out. It's not exactly fun reading. It's very sleep-inducing, and it's not particularly well written, but I have read it so that you do not have to. And I will try to summarize it for you. The intended audience of this guide is teachers. And whenever we're talking about texts, this is a text, we should also be thinking about readers and writers. Who wrote this text is a big mystery. There's nobody's name on it. It was probably a team of English teachers who were brought together over a period of a few years. And when you read it, you realize why they say that a mule is a horse designed by committee. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about assessment, texts, concepts, areas of exploration, and global issue. So in particular, I'm going to talk about the first two things here, assessment and texts. So you are presumably at the beginning of your 2-year journey through IB English. That's IB English Language and Literature. Some of you are higher level, some of you are standard level. That's okay. One of the first places you should start with any course that you're taking is, how will I be assessed? How will I be graded? In the end, at the end of your 2-year course, you will receive a grade of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. 7 being best, and 1, we don't even want to think about ones. As you will remember, Adolf Hitler got a 1 in IB higher level mathematics, and he did not take it well. So we don't even want to think about ones. Basically, everybody at a good international school like KC High can, will, and should score 4 or higher. 4 is passing. 5 at a school like ours is what we would expect as a minimum score. We would expect 5 or better. 6 is very good. If you're getting a 6, that's solid. 7 is exceptional. I think only about 3 or 4% of the students worldwide, of the IB students worldwide, score a 7. So it's not easy to get a 7. If you get a 7, you are a very strong student, and congratulations. So in standard level, you will write paper 1, which is a guided textual analysis. You will be given 2 non-literary passages, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then you will have to write 1 response to one of those passages. It's called a guided inquiry, a guided response, a guided analysis. You'll be given a passage which is non-literary. Paper 1 is the non-literary part. It could be a blog entry. It could be a letter to the editor. It could be some sort of business proposal. It could be any kind of non-literary English, and you will be asked to analyze it. In particular, you will be asked to look at things like its form, its function, how does its form match its function, its content, what does it mean, how is it structured in a way to serve its purpose. Those kind of things will be what you need to analyze. In paper 2, you will write a comparative essay where you compare two works of literature. Those works of literature will be amongst the 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 works of literature that we read over the next 2 years, and you'll have to compare them. You will be given a list of 4 questions, and this is the literature component of your exams. Paper 1 and paper 2 are both exams. They're timed exams. Paper 2 is 105 minutes. That means 1 hour and 45 minutes. Paper 1 is 1 hour and 15 minutes if you're standard level, 2 hours and 15 minutes if you're higher level, because if you're higher level, you must answer both the questions on paper 1. There's a higher level essay, which is a take-home essay, one you will construct over a period of weeks, and that must be between 1,200 and 1,500 words. It will be critical literary analysis. You can analyze either literary or non-literary works. And then there's an internal assessment. That means that the teacher marks it, not the IB, and you will have a 10-minute prepared piece where you look at a global issue and you look at some texts, a non-literary text and a literary work, and you analyze how those texts help you to understand different perspectives on a global issue. And your teacher will then ask you 5 minutes of questions after that. That will be recorded very carefully and assessed by your teacher, and then the IB will check the teacher's assessments. So 35%, 35%, paper 1, paper 2, and then 30% on the individual orals if you're standard level. 35 plus 25 plus 20 plus 20 makes 100% on higher levels. So that's a rough overview of how you will be assessed in this 2-year course and how that final grade of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 will be constructed. Here's a bunch of words. We're going to use these words a lot. I'm not going to actually explain them now, but these are words that have specific meanings in the context of an English class, and you will need to start getting used to these words and using them regularly and understanding what they mean in this context. Most of these words you'll know, maybe you'll know all of them, but they may have different meanings and different shades of meanings, and you will need to understand what they mean in relation to the study of language and literature. Work, for example, in physics means force times distance, but it has a completely different meaning here, where it is a substantial piece of creative output by an author of literature. Or, it could be a novel, or it could be a collection of poems, for example. Okay, I'm not going to actually explain all these words, so let's just look at them real quickly. This will take about a minute. Let's see if this works. Just get used to these words. See them first. Then think about them. Then look them up. Then use them. Let's see if this works. In the beginning. Text. Context. Time and space, like that. Canon, I love that word. The end. Okay, so like I said, that's a bunch of words, and we will need to use these words, and I will be using them frequently, and they are words that are found in the IB guide and words that the IB expects you to be familiar with. Okay, text type. So essentially the name of this course is Language and Literature, and there are two types of texts that we study. Those are non-literary and literary. You'll see in the photograph there a copy of a well-worn book, The Complete Works of William Shakespeare. Notice that it is works, not work, because it includes many of his works. For example, it will include a play like Julius Caesar, a play like Twelfth Night, but it will also include his sonnets, which would be another work. So the literary text types basically are plays, novels, an anthology of poems such as Shakespeare's sonnets, or a collection of short stories. So that's what we call a literary text type. When we're studying literature, we will be studying texts like these. So let's look at an example. Of course, Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart is a novel, and it is certainly a well-established novel that counts as literature. So what is literature? What is a literary text? I've just put some examples down there. There are, of course, thousands upon thousands of literary texts, but the ones that are most widely studied are probably what we would call the canon, although that's a highly controversial idea. But there are things that you can Google, such as lists of the 100 greatest novels. We should probably do that and see what comes up. But there are these texts that have been studied over and over again at universities in English classes and literature classes, which are considered kind of the classic texts, and they form part of what we're calling literary texts. So I've just jotted some down here: Julius Caesar, Frankenstein, beautiful novel there, Maya Angelou's poems, Edgar Allan Poe's stories, Things Fall Apart, which we're reading now, The God of Small Things, and Persepolis. So you see there what the IB wants. Now, this is not what we're going to study, but it could be a course of study. We haven't planned out exactly what we're going to study yet, because there's another teacher to get involved, and your voice is important as well. But we are obviously beginning with Things Fall Apart. But you'll see there, Julius Caesar, I think 1598, 1599, something like that, right around the year 1600. So the end of the 16th century, the beginning of the 17th century, that's when Shakespeare wrote. Frankenstein, of course, I think 1818, 1820, something like that. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. Now, when we talk about Frankenstein, I'm not just talking about the book, but also the book and its impact on culture and its impact on society and its reputation and what other people have written about it, and the author and why she wrote it, and also things like what spin-offs did it have. Obviously, Frankenstein has had a lot of spin-offs, including movies and a whole genre of maybe science fiction movies, etc. Maya Angelou's poems, that again would be, I guess, a body of work. Edgar Allan Poe's stories. So now you see there's a mixture here of centuries, 16th, 19th, 20th, 19th, Things Fall Apart, and God of Small Things are also 20th century stories, but also different parts of the world. I see Shakespeare was English, so was Mary Shelley. Maya Angelou is American, so is Edgar Allan Poe. Chinua Achebe is Nigerian. Arundhati Roy is Indian, and what's her name? I haven't read Persepolis, but a lot of people put it on it. Majani Sadapi, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. She's Iranian French, and French Iranian, I don't know how you would call it. She wrote in French. It's a graphic novel. Oh, there it is, Marianne Satrapi. Oh, I should have known that. Okay, so she wrote in French, and that book was translated into English. All those other 6 pieces were written originally in English. is, the name of the course is English. There will be a focus on English literature and things written in English, but we should also consider things written in other languages and translated into English when we read them. Okay, so, those are not necessarily the things we will read, but there's a selection. Different centuries, different nationalities, different genres. You have a play, a novel, a collection of poems, a collection of short stories, 2 more novels, and a graphic novel. Is a graphic novel a literary text? I think in this case it is, okay? Non-literary text types. So now we're talking about non-literary text types. There can be so many, for example, I would say a YouTube video can count as a non-literary text type. So let's just look at one, why don't we? And maybe that will help you understand a non-literary text type. So here is Maya Angelou, the poet that I just referred to, talking about recalling and remembering a conversation that she had with a young poet, a rap star known as Tupac Shakur. Now this is pretty complicated stuff. It is a conversation, a recollection. She's recalling a conversation with a young man who has since died. Of course, Maya Angelou since this time has died, but obviously she's alive when she's speaking. Now just listen to her language. This is a poet speaking. It's non-literary text. This is not a poem, but just listen to the way she speaks. Is a YouTube video a text type? I guess so, but I don't really know. Let's hear it.
And I said, excuse me. And I said, excuse me. May I speak? The young man who was curt said, I wouldn't give up. I said, I understand that. I understand that, but may I speak? If these I said, I've heard that before too. But may I speak to you? You see, if they think they really got it wrong, and so I said, I see that. But when was the last time anyone told you how important you are? You're the best we have. We need you desperately. Do you know that our people stood on auction blocks for you? Did you know we got up before sunrise and slept after sunset so that you could stay alive? You could be here this day? I put my arm around his waist and I just walked him down a little sort of decline and I talked to him about our people.
And she put her arms around him and she just walked him away. And they had their own private moment. I don't know everything that was said, but it was phenomenal.
Suddenly he started to cry. And I turned his back to the crowd and just talked to him. I didn't have a Kleenex or handkerchief. I just took my hand and wiped his face. And when he had control of himself again, I continued to my trailer. Within 2 minutes, Miss Janet Jackson came to my trailer. She said, Dr. Angelo, I don't believe you actually spoke to Tupac Shakur. So I said, darling, I don't know six-pack. I didn't that. I had no idea who you are. She said, well, he's a very famous rap star.
Okay, so there you have it. Maya Angelou, brilliant stuff. Okay, so there's Maya Angelou talking about her conversation with Tupac Shakur, and there's a lot to unpack there, right? Because not only is it two poets talking, and it's also about creativity, about the human spirit, about what it means to be human. They're on the set of a movie called Poetic Justice, and she's talking about her history, her people's history, African American history, his roles, his responsibilities, how to control his temper, etc. So these are very, very human issues, and there's a lot going on in that conversation. And our job in IB English is to analyze things like this, which is a non-literary text, even though it is in reference to literature and poetry and all of that. So what really does go on in an IB course? Well, I'm going to go through it real quickly here. We read, absolutely, that's critically important. then we discuss and analyze, then we write, okay? And these are the basic activities of an IB English course. Of course, this is all within an academic context, so they all feed upon each other, and you should think of it as a cycle. You know, it's not like we do this in 3 separate stages. We're constantly reading, constantly discussing and analyzing, constantly writing, and then going back and reading more, because our discussions, our analysis, our writing encourages us to read more, to learn more, and we have more ideas. So in school, we call these things, you know, homework, classwork, and assessment. A lot of your homework will be reading. A lot of your classwork will be discussion and analysis. A lot of your assessment, how we assess you, will be mostly writing. But what is it we're reading, and what is it we're writing about, and what is it we're discussing and analyzing? Of course, at the center of it all are these texts, these literary and non-literary texts, some of which your teacher will choose for you and some of which you will choose for yourself. Of course, nothing like a course or any human activity is complete without people, and the most important person in this whole thing is you, the student. The purpose of this course, the purpose of IB English, the purpose of the IB program in general is to make you a better reader, a better writer, a better scholar, a better student, and a more thoughtful person, and in reality, a better person. That's what you come to school for, to become more educated, more civilized, and a better person, to be more thoughtful, to see other perspectives, to understand yourself, your own identity, your culture better, to understand your relationship to peoples, to things like power and politics and structures in the society, to cultures. These are the type of things that we go to an English class for, or even that we go to school for. Of course, there are also these ghosts in the conversation, and that is the writers of the texts that you are reading, and you will be in conversation with them as well. And then there's your teacher, of course, hopefully facilitating this whole process. So lastly, I'll just say, whoa, I forgot about that. Is a bumper sticker a text type? Well, it depends on whether we have a conservative approach to what are text types and what is literature, etc., or a more radical approach. So conservatively, we should say no, bumper stickers are not a text type. They're kind of a passing fad of a particular time and era in humanity. They're not really, they're definitely not literature. But then when we start looking more carefully, we might see that, yeah, bumper stickers are kind of interesting, and they might even be connected to all these conversations that we were just talking about. So, for example, intertextuality, these conversations between authors and texts. So, for example, Things Fall Apart, Chinua Achebe is a Christian, and he's writing about the time when Christians first came to his land in Nigeria. That would have been about the 1890s, around the turn of the century, between the 19th and the 20th century. And he quotes at the beginning of his, the epigraph at the beginning of his novel is a poem from William Butler Yeats. I think it was written about 1920, called The Second Coming. And, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. And he also makes references to Joseph Conrad. I can't even remember who that guy on the lower left is. It's not Joseph Conrad, that's for sure. It's from way before that. Oh, I do believe that's John Milton. Right. And all of these refer back to the Bible, including Milton's amazing poem, a very long poem, called Paradise Lost. So a lot of these things are in conversation. They're all linked to each other through this idea of the second coming, when some God, in particular Jesus Christ, comes down out of heaven and tries to clean up this mess that humans have made. of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe, with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse! That's Milton on the subject of the second coming, or in the words of the bumper sticker, God is coming, and boy is she pissed. By the way, that's American English there. Pissed as in the American English meaning angry, not pissed as in the British English meaning drunk. Although that would be an interesting interpretation. See how much there is to talk about the conversation between these various texts. Okay, lastly, I'm just going to say, what are we doing here? We are going to talk a lot about concepts and global issues. What does that mean? I can list them all off for you if you want me to. You know, I can talk about communication and culture and representation and transformation and identity and perspectives and all that stuff, and, you know, art and creativity and beliefs, values and traditions and power and politics and all that stuff, and use all those words the IB likes to use, but I'll just try to boil it down to this. In literature, we're discussing what does it mean to be a human being. Now, I don't know if t-shirts are a text type or not, but Solomon Connor, some very clever people, took that thing and turned it around and built a foundation, a charitable foundation or a profitable company. I don't know. I'll leave it to you to find out. Being human, that's what we're here for. Have a great day. Thanks for listening. Please read the book. Please do read the book.